Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University. School of Agriculture, SSOA Certificate in Organic Farming, COF BAPI 001 Organic Production System. Block-1 Farm Management. Unit-3 Water Management. 3.0 Objectives. The present unit aims at familiarizing you with the water management in different crops. Methods of irrigation. Critical stages of crop development, need for water harvesting, and importance of water conservation. 3.1 Introduction. We know, water is crucial to life and existence. It is equally important for crops as well. Water management is an important aspect in the cultivation. It refers to irrigation, drainage, water harvest, and storage of water as well as conservation of water. Irrigation is very important in improving the yield and quality of crops. In waterlogged areas, the drainage of excess water is equally important. We should harvest and conserve the rainwater for irrigation during dry seasons. Many water management technologies have been evolved over the years. Some of them are adopted by the farmers. Significance and approaches of water management varies widely in different climatic zones. It also gets affected due to differential moisture retention capacity of soils. The importance of irrigation for crop varies differentially in sandy soils and deep loam soils. Similarly, importance of water management varies between deep-rooted crops and shallow-rooted crops. In organic farming, the irrigation water should be drawn from a safe source. Also, during conveyance, the water should not pass through any hazardous materials. India's IGNOU, National Program for Organic Production, advocates that soil and water resources should be used in a sustainable manner. 3.2 Functions of irrigation water in the soil. Besides nursing the plants, water has important functions in the soil as well. The irrigation water softens the tillage pans. It acts as a solvent and carrier for the nutrients which is absorbed by the crop plants. The irrigation water supplies moisture that is essential for the beneficial microbes and for the chemical reactions within the plant responsible for plant growth. Some salts present in soil get dissolved in water and help nourish the plants. Irrigation water is also helpful in washing out or diluting the unwanted salts from the soil. 3.3 Quality of irrigation water. The quality of irrigation water depends primarily on its silt and salts contents. Silt may add fertility to the soil, but tends to clog channels and canals. It is deposited in some parts of the field, necessitating periodic land leveling. There are many factors that determine water quality. The important factors are the total concentration of the salt, the proportion of sodium to other cations, and the presence of toxic ions such as borate, chloride, sodium, or bicarbonate. As salt concentration increases, problem of drainage and prevention of excessive accumulation become important. In the medium and fine textured soils, exchangeable sodium to the tune of 12 to 15% reduces their permeability. The availability of plant nutrients is also disturbed. Excess sodium is more difficult to manage because of its equilibrium relationship between the exchangeable cations of clay and cations in the soil solution. All irrigation water contains sufficient salt to damage crop plants if it is accumulated. Careful attention is required for managing the salt content. Good drainage creates conducive condition for prevention. A second preventive condition is the application of additional irrigation water periodically to leach out excess salts from the soil. In some situations, water of low quality can be mixed with higher quality to form acceptable irrigation water. In addition, crop plants vary appreciably in tolerance to salt. So selection of crops may be another step towards reducing salinity effects. In sandy soils, drip irrigation with water, often considered too saline for irrigation, has been effective. For irrigating an organic farm, the irrigation water should be obtained from a chemical-free source. 3.4 Standards for irrigation water. Irrigation water may be unsatisfactory for organic farming if it contains chemicals/metals that are toxic to plants or for the persons using the plants or their produce as food. 2. React in the soil to produce unsatisfactory moisture characteristics, and 3. facilitate development of bacteria which may harm plants or their produce or are harmful to human beings or animals. In an organic farm, appropriate steps should be taken to avoid such contamination. 3.5 Scheduling of irrigation. When available soil moisture is reduced to a point at which significant reduction in plant growth rate occurs, the crop should be irrigated. In practice, the farmer decides the appropriate time of irrigation based on plant appearance, stage of crop development, soil characteristics, soil moisture content and climatic factors. The period between two irrigations is determined by the water holding capacity of the soil, the depth of rooting of the crop, and the quality of the irrigation water. Evapotranspiration, ET, is an important factor in determining time and frequency of irrigation. The scheduling of irrigation includes I. How to irrigate, 2. How much to irrigate, and 3. When to irrigate. 3.6 Preparation of land for irrigation. Land preparation is an important aspect of cultivation. For proper irrigation, we need a well-leveled field. The land preparation for irrigation should be done by removal of bushes, roots of trees and leveling the land. The land should be provided with proper slope in the direction of falling gradient. For it, the land may be divided into small plots depending on the method of irrigation to be practiced. Supply and drainage water courses should be kept for ensuring proper flow. 3.7 Methods of irrigation. The manner in which the irrigation water is applied to land is called methods of irrigation. Generally crops are irrigated by surface and subsurface methods. These are the common practices utilized whether crop is grown organically or not. The surface irrigation methods include uncontrolled or wild flooding, controlled flooding, contour laterals, border strip method, check flooding, basin flooding, zigzag method, furrow method, corrugation method, and contour irrigation. In subsurface irrigation method, water is introduced in the root zone directly. This method includes use of perforated pipes, tiles, subsurface drip, etc. Let us examine some of the important irrigation methods in details. 3.7.1 Surface irrigation methods. 3.7.1.1 Uncontrolled or wild flooding. In uncontrolled or wild flooding method, water is applied in flat land without much preparation. This method is used in the inundation irrigation system, in which water from high stream flow is led to spread over the entire area. It is practiced largely where irrigation water is abundant and inexpensive. But it is a faulty approach to manage the water. It is discouraged in organic farming. 3.7.1.2 Controlled flooding. In the controlled flooding, water is allowed to spread over the land which has been bundled properly to control the depth of water. Controlled flooding can be achieved by free flooding, contour laterals, border strips, or by checks or levees. This method is also known as irrigation in plots. The field is divided into a number of small-sized properly leveled plots. Water is allowed into these plots at the higher end and the supply is cut off as soon as the lower part of the plot has received the sufficient depth of water. Oblong plots are preferred to square ones. The size of plots depends on the porosity of the soil. 3.7.1.3 Contour laterals. This method is useful in the steeper terrain. The field is cut into relatively dense network of small contour laterals. The spacing of the laterals depends upon the slope gradient of the field between two adjacent laterals, the uniformity of slope, and the soil type. 3.7.1.4 Border strip method. In the border strip method, the farm is divided into a series of strips of 10 to 20 meters width and 100 to 300 meters length. These strips are separated by low levees or bunds and run down the predominant slope. Water is turned on from the supply ditch onto the head of the border for irrigation. The advancing water is confined and guided towards the lower end of the strip. The leveled surface facilitates the advancing of water to cover the entire strip. This method is suitable for forage crops. The advantages are low investment, low labor requirement and high irrigation efficiency. The length of border strip depends on infiltration rate of the soil, longitudinal slope of the land, and size of irrigation stream available. The following lengths of border strip are suggested for moderate conditions: sandy oil or sandy loam 60 to 90 meters, medium silt loam 90 to 150 meters, clay loam or clay soil 150 to 300 meters. 3.7.1.5 Check flooding. In the check flooding method, large stream discharges water into a leveled plot surrounded by checks or levees. The levees are generally 2 to 3 meters wide at their bases. They will not be more than 25 to 30 centimeters in height. In a leveled farm, the plots are generally rectangular in shape. If the ground has some slope, the checks or levees may follow the contours. The method is suitable for both permeable and impermeable soils. The permeable soil has to be quickly covered with water to prevent excessive percolation losses, and the impermeable soil has poor infiltration, which should be covered with slow-moving water stream. 3.7.1.6 Basin flooding. The basin flooding is suitable for the trees. The basins are usually formed for each tree. In some cases, one basin may be formed for 2 or more trees. The basins may also be interconnected. Water is supplied to these basins through a supply ditch. 3.7.1.7 Zigzag method. In the zigzag method of flooding, water takes a circuitous route before reaching the dead end of each plot. The whole area is divided into a number of square or rectangular plots. Each plot is then subdivided with the help of low bunds or levees. This method is suitable for leveled plots. 3.7.1.8 Furrow method. The furrow method of irrigation is used for row crops like maize, jowar, sugarcane, cotton, tobacco, groundnut and potatoes. In this method, only 1/2 to 1/5 of the surface is wetted, thereby the evaporation loss is reduced. A furrow consists of a narrow ditch between rows of plants. The length of furrows varies from 3.0 meters or less for garden crops to as much as 500 meters for field crops. If the furrows are too lengthy, losses due to deep percolation and soil erosion near the upper end of the field may occur. The general slope for furrows may vary from 0.2 to 5%. For maize, potatoes, sugarcane and other row crops, one irrigation furrow is usually provided for each row. The common size of furrows for row crops such as cotton, tobacco and potatoes is about 25 centimeters wide and 8 to 10 centimeters deep. The spacing of furrows is kept from 1 to 2 meters in case of orchard irrigation. It is essential to have deeper furrows for irrigating the crops like sugarcane. 3.7.1.9 Corrugation method. The corrugations are small furrows that are used for grain and forage crops. The corrugations are appropriate when the available irrigation streams are small. These are also suitable for lands of uneven topography. 3.7.1.10 Contour irrigation. Contour farming is the practice of carrying out field operation, such as plowing, planting and cultivating land across the slope. Contour farming is practiced in hilly areas. The farm area is divided into contours. The irrigation water is stored in the depressions between the bunds. 3.7.2 Subsurface irrigation. The subsurface irrigation method consists of supplying water directly to the root zone of the plants. Water is supplied to a series of ditches, 1/2 to 1 meter deep and 25 to 50 centimeters wide with vertical sides. These ditches are located at 50 to 100 centimeters apart. Water flows at a slow rate and seeps into the ground. The subsurface irrigation method is suitable for impervious subsurface at reasonable depth or high water table and for permeable soils in the root zone. Uniform topographic conditions, moderate slopes and good quality irrigation water are required for subsurface irrigation. Precautions should also be taken to prevent salt accumulation or water logging. This method is preferred because of economical use of water and low labor cost in the land preparation for irrigation. 3.7.3 Pressurized irrigation. This method includes sprinkle and drip systems of water application. In sprinkler method, water is sprayed over the crop through nozzle. The method is useful where soil topography is uneven. Soluble plant nutrients can also be applied. along with sprinkler irrigation. Drip irrigation is also called trickle irrigation is the method of applying water slowly and directly to the root zone of the crop plants. Due to pressure, water oozes out from the emitters and trickle in the root area of plants. This system of water application was originally developed in Israel by Simcha Blas, a hydraulic engineer in 1959. We may also apply plant nutrients along with water directly to the root zone. It saves about 70% of water in comparison to the surface method of water application. There are many more methods of water application such as pitcher method, subsoil injection, suction irrigation, etc. These methods are location-specific, hence not practiced widely. 3.8 Availability of soil water. Water availability to the crops depends on the crop variety, climatic odd management factors. Based on the availability of soil water to plants, some concepts are widely used in water management. These are saturation capacity, field capacity, available moisture, readily available moisture, permanent wilting, temporary wilting and ultimate wilting points. Let us have a closer look each one of them. 3.8.1 Saturation capacity. This is also called as maximum moisture holding capacity of the soil. It refers to the amount of water required to fill all the pore spaces between soil particles. When the porosity of a soil is known, the saturation capacity can be expressed as equivalent cm of water per meter of soil depth. 3.8.2 Field capacity. The field capacity refers to the moisture content of the soil after free flow water has moved due to gravity. The concept is useful in calculating the amount of water available in the soil for plant use. It is equivalent to 1/3d atmosphere and depicted in percentage. 3.8.3 Readily available moisture. The portion of the available moisture that is most easily extracted by plants is called readily available moisture. It is approximately 75% of the available moisture. 3.8.4 Available moisture. The difference in the moisture content of the soil between field capacity and permanent wilting point is known as available water or available moisture regime. 3.8.5 Temporary wilting or incipient wilting point. Temporary wilting may sometimes takes place during hot windy days, but the plant may recover during the cooler part of the day. It does not require any addition of water. The temporary wilting may take place during the hot summer days, even when soil moisture is higher than the wilting coefficient. This happens due to higher transpiration. 3.8.6 Permanent wilting point. Permanent wilting point or the wilting coefficient refers to the water content at which plants can no longer extract sufficient water from the soil for its growth. The permanent wilting point is at the lower end of the available moisture range. If the plant is permanently wilted, it will not regain its turgidity even after being placed in a saturated atmosphere. At the permanent wilting point, the films of water around the soil particles are held so tightly that the plant roots cannot extract enough moisture at sufficient rate to satisfy transpiration requirements of the plant, resulting in wilting of the plant. The permanent wilting depends upon the rate of water used by the plant, the depth of the root zone, and the water holding capacity of the soil. Each crop or variety will have a different permanent wilting point. 3.8.7 Ultimate wilting. Ultimate wilting is slightly different from permanent wilting with respect to regaining turgidity. When ultimate wilting occurs, the plant will not regain its turgidity even after the addition of sufficient water to the soil. Consequently, the plant dies. 3.8.8 Plant appearance. Many farmers use plant appearance as an indication to decide when to irrigate the crop. The symptoms of water stress vary with the crops. The symptoms may differ with stage of growth also. Leaves of crops become dark green as soil. Moisture stress becomes severe in crops such as beans, cotton and groundnut. The leaves of maize and sorghum curl and change their orientation as moisture stress increases. In other crops, Pronounced leaf wilting could be seen. 3.9 Root zone. Plants differ in their ability to withdraw water from soil, water use rate and ability to withstand soil water stress. About 40% of the water used by plants is taken from the top 25% of the root zone. So, any amount of water added to the soil beyond field capacity in the bottom 25% of the root zone will cause only deep percolation. Crop rooting depth will be dependent on local conditions such as soil type, compaction, shallow water tables, soil salinity and fertility. Different crops have different rooting depths. Plants have shallow zone in clay soils and deeper root zone in sandy soils. 3.10 Critical stages in crop development. In some stages of crop development, irrigation is a must. Otherwise, there will be a definite reduction in yield. Such stages are called critical stages. When irrigation water is limited, there may be opportunities for irrigating the crop at least during the critical stages. Irrigation during certain periods indicated below seems to benefit the crops. Let us discuss the critical stages of some important crops. 3.10.1 Cereals and millets. The critical stages of wheat crop include early growth, booting, flowering, and grain formation. Early booting, tillering and soft dough are the critical stages for barley. The oats require irrigation from the beginning of ear emergence to flowering. Flowering and early seed developments as well as grain filling period are recognized as critical stages for maize crop. As far as millets are concerned, tillering, flowering, booting, heading and grain development are the critical stages. For sorghum, heading and flowering are the stages for pearl millet. 3.10.2 Legumes and oilseed crops. Among the legume crops, alfalfa has to be irrigated immediately after cutting. For hay, flowering and seed pod formation stages are the critical stages for other crops like peas and beans. Oilseed crops like groundnut and sunflower require irrigation during the critical stages of flowering and pod setting/head formation. 3.10.3 Vegetables and FDT crops. Flowering and period of rapid fruit development are critical stages for crops like tomatoes. Head formation and enlargement are the stages of critical irrigation. For broccoli and cabbage, the fruit crops like citrus and mango require irrigation at the critical stages like flowering and fruit setting. 3.11 Water management for different crops. 3.11.1 Water management for paddy. Water requirement for paddy is high. Assured and timely irrigation influences the yield significantly. The critical periods are the seedling establishment period, tillering and panicle initiation to flowering stage. Until the transplanted seedlings are well established, water should be allowed to stand in the field at a depth of 2 to 5 centimeters. Thereafter, about 5 centimeters of water may be maintained up to the dough stage of the crop. Water should be drained out from the field 7 to 15 days before harvest depending on the soil type to encourage quick and uniform maturity of grain. Application of small quantities of water at frequent intervals to keep the soil under saturated condition is more effective and economical than flooding at long intervals. However, flooding suppresses the weed growth. The SSOA technology advocates the following guidelines of water management for creating unsaturated soil condition in the field. During the vegetative growth period, water may be applied only to keep the soil moist and not for saturating the soil with standing water. The field may be left dried out for several short periods of 2 to 6 days to the point of surface cracking. Otherwise, flood and dry the field for alternate periods of 3 to 6 days each. Throughout the period of vegetative after panicle initiation, only a thin film of water, 1 to 2 centimeters, is to be kept in the field. Should be well drained 10 to 15 days before harvest for uniform in terms of field performance and yield. The SSOA technology has attracted lot of organic farmers who evince keen interest in large-scale adoption. 3.11.2 Water management for wheat. Adequate soil moisture is required for normal development of the wheat crop at all the stages of growth. In case of dwarf high-yielding varieties, a pre-sowing irrigation should be given. At the crown root initiation stage, 20 to 25 days after sowing, the first irrigation to the standing crop should be given to ensure good tillering, normal heads, sound root system and ultimately sufficient grain yield. The second irrigation should be given at tillering stage, within 40,745 days after sowing. Irrigation is given at late jointing stage, within 70 to 75 days after sowing. Irrigation at flowering stage, within 90 to 95 days, is important to ensure more grain number and better grain size. At dough stage, within 110-115 days after sowing, another irrigation is required. Of course, the number of irrigations required depends on soil type, rainfall and amount of water applied per irrigation. If only one irrigation is possible, it should be given at crown root initiation stage, i.e., 20 to 25 days after sowing. If two irrigations are available, first irrigation should be given at crown root initiation stage and second at flowering stage. If three irrigations are possible, first irrigation should be given at crown root initiation stage, second at jointing stage and third at milk stage. 3.11.3 Water management for maize. Maize is sensitive to excess water as well as moisture stress. Water should not be allowed to stand in the maize field at any stage of its growth. Maize can tolerate heavy rains, provided excess water is drained away. A good crop requires about 460 to 600 millimeters of water during its life cycle. At tasseling to silking stage, water requirement is critical. At shortage may reduce maize yields considerably. 3.11.4 Water management for barley. Barley is usually grown as rain-fed crop because of its low water requirement. It may require 2 to 3 irrigations to give good yields. If supply of water is inadequate, irrigation may be given near active tillering stage, 30 to 35 days after sowing. If two irrigations are possible, one should be applied at active tillering and the other at flowering stage. An extra irrigation may be required on sandy soils. On saline and sodic soils, frequent light irrigations give better results. 3.11.5 Water management for sorghum, bajra, and ragi. Sorghum is generally raised as a rain-fed crop. The irrigation should be provided during flowering and grain-filling stages. If rains are not received, the plants should not be allowed to wilt. Proper drainage conditions should also be provided for the removal of excess rainwater from the field. Bajra is a rain-fed crop, hence, irrigation is needed only if there are no rains. Though irrigations during the growing period of the crop are adequate, earhead emergence is the most critical stage and the crop has to be irrigated to avoid yield loss. Bajra does not tolerate water logging, so, proper arrangement for draining the excess water must be made. Ragi sown during Kharif does not require any irrigation. However, at tillering and flowering stages, if there is no rain for a long spell, irrigation may be required to obtain good yield. Ragi crop does not perform well under water-logged condition. Therefore, proper arrangements for draining of excess water is essential. 3.11.6 Water management for pulses. Bengal gram is mostly sown as a rain-fed crop. However, if irrigation facilities are available, a pre-sowing irrigation may be given to ensure proper germination and crop growth. If winter rains fail, irrigation at pre-flowering and at pod development stage may be given. No irrigation should be given at flowering time. Garden pea is mostly grown in rain-fed areas. It can tolerate drought condition to some extent. With 1 or 2 irrigations, higher yield can be obtained. The irrigation for pea should be light and uniform. Waterlogging condition in pea field causes considerable loss in the yield. Being a deep-rooted crop, red gran can tolerate drought. If planted in June, 1 or 2 pre-monsoon irrigations should be given. After the onset of monsoon, there is no need of irrigation. If there is drought during the reproductive period of the crop, 1 or 2 irrigations may be required. The crop requires proper Drainage. If green gram or black gram is raised during rainy season, drainage is way important because both the crops are sensitive to waterlogging. For rabi and summer crops, 5 to 6 irrigations may be given. The first irrigation should be given about 20 to 25 days after sowing. The subsequent irrigations should be given at an interval of 12 to 15 days. During Kharif, soybean crop does not require any irrigation. If there is a drought at the time of pod filling, irrigation is required. During heavy rainfall, drainage is important. Spring crop may require 5 to 6 irrigations. 3.11.7 Water management for oilseed crops. Groundnut does not require irrigation if raised as a rain-fed crop. However, if there is zero dry spell, irrigation may be necessary. Irrigation should be given at pod development stage. The field should be well rained. In South India, groundnut is GRDWN until BAPI season. Then, 3 to 4 irrigations are necessary. The first irrigation may be given at the start of flowering phase, and the subsequent irrigations whenever required to encourage peg penetration and pod development. The last irrigation just before harvesting facilitates full recovery of pods from the soil. The sesame crop requires about 50 cm of water during the entire growth period. The first irrigation may be given after 25 to 40 days of sowing. Second and third irrigations may be given at flowering and pod development stages, i.e., 45 to 50 and 65 to 70 days after sowing. Light irrigation is recommended in the evening, when there is no wind, to avoid lodging. It is considered essential to irrigate. At maximum flowering phase, irrigation may be given to ensure the development of capsules fully. One castor is usually a rain-fed crop. However, it responds well to irrigation. Irrigations need to be heavy and less frequent to benefit this deep-rooted crop. 2 to 3 heavy irrigations may get good yield. Critical irrigation at flowering stage is essential. In heavy rainfall areas, proper drainage is essential. Generally, rapeseed and mustard are raised on the conserved moisture from monsoon rains. Adequate land preparation through plowings and leveling, application of organic manures and use of mulches may facilitate conservation of moisture, resulting in high yield. These crops respond well to irrigation. 2. Irrigations at pre-bloom and pod filling stages are considered critical irrigation. Sunflower is a crop of medium water requirement. No irrigation is needed for Kharif crop. However, irrigation may be beneficial in the event of uneven distribution of rainfall. Pre-sowing irrigation is essential for Rabi and Zaid crops to get uniform germination and better stand. Rabi crop may be irrigated thrice at 4 to 5 leaf stage. Flowering and grain filling stages of the crop may be after 40, 75 and 110 days of sowing. Between flowering and grain filling stages of the crop, at least irrigation must be given. It requires 4 to 8 irrigations at an interval of 10 to 15 days during Zaid season. Light irrigation at grain filling stage should be given, especially on a windless evening, to avoid lodging. 3.11.8 Water management for cotton and jute. The first irrigation should be given 40 to 45 days after sowing cotton crop. It helps in preventing excessive vegetative growth. The subsequent irrigations should be light. These should be given at an interval of 2 to 3 weeks. The crop must not be allowed to suffer from water stress during fruiting and flowering period, otherwise, it may cause excessive shedding of flower buds and young bolls, resulting in loss of yield. During early growth period, cotton is very sensitive to water stagnation for long periods. Hence, the excess water of rain or irrigation should be drained. The crop cannot tolerate waterlogging condition at any stage of growth. Jute is generally grown under rain-fed conditions. The crop suffers if rains are not timely or abundant. During rainy season, excess water should be drained to avoid waterlogging. Jute yields better under irrigated conditions. An irrigation before sowing and 3 irrigations after sowing are considered optimum for increased fiber production of early sown jute. 3.12 Water conveyance. Water conveyance is the process of water transportation from source to field to be irrigated. Loss of water during conveyance in canals and other systems is mainly by seepage and evaporation. The seepage reduced by 30% by lining the canals with concrete. The loss due to evaporation from the canals can be reduced by providing water only on demand instead of keeping the canals continuously filled. Using underground conveyance system may altogether eliminate evaporation and deep percolation losses. These issues needs policy intervention at the community and government level. 3.13 Water harvesting. Water harvesting refers to collection of rainwater from the roofs of buildings and storing it underground for future use. It also denotes the rainwater storage in low-lying areas of a field or in the ponds during rainy season and their utilization for irrigation. The water harvesting facilitates recharging the groundwater table and improves the quality of groundwater through the dilution of fluoride, nitrate, and salinity. Thus, water harvesting makes available more water for use. Globally, many methods of water harvesting have been used over centuries. In water-scarce areas, people have developed techniques of water harvesting suited to their situations. The people of arid and semi-arid areas have constructed tanks by excavating the ground and by providing bunds for collection of rainwater. The people of Rajasthan developed reservoirs, khadan, dams, johads, tanks and other methods to check water flow and to accumulate runoff. Water stored in these structures was available for irrigation. The people of other regions also developed similar systems. Dul Tale of Uttar Pradesh, the Haveli system of Madhya Pradesh, Ahar of Bihar and Kanmai of Tamil Nadu are few examples. Farm ponds should be developed in organic farms to harvest and store rainwater in order to supply irrigation water during droughts and to enhance the water. 3.14 Water conservation. Water conservation implies the application of approaches to minimize the water loss. Better management practices aim at increasing water use efficiency. Determining the volume of water needed to maximize productivity is as important as minimizing the wastage of water. The techniques that are used to reduce the demand for water deserve attention. Only a part of the rainfall or irrigation water is utilized by plants. The remaining water either percolates down into the groundwater or evaporates from the soil surface. By employing techniques that can help improve the water use efficiency and evaporation loss, water demand can be reduced. Plowing helps in holding more water and reduces evaporation. Adoption of contour farming in hilly areas and in lowland paddy fields helps conserve water. Use of organic materials such as crop waste and compost for mulching slows down the surface runoff, improves the soil moisture, reduces evaporation losses and ultimately improves soil fertility. Cover crops also slow down runoff and minimize evaporation losses. Shelter belts of trees and bushes along the edge of agricultural fields slow down the wind speed and reduce evaporation and erosion. Similarly, planting of trees, grass and bushes reduces the velocity of rain and helps rainwater infiltration into the soil. Conservation tillage helps preserve soil moisture by leaving at least 30% of the soil surface covered with crop stubble, thereby decreasing wind and water erosion. The crop stubble layer reduces evaporation in the soil profile by 1/2 compared to bare soil. 3.15 Summary. Irrigation is important for improving the yield and quality of crops. Quality of water influences productivity of crops. For an efficient water management, concepts of land preparation, scheduling of irrigation and various methods of irrigation are to be understood. In this context, depth of root zones of different crops as well as appearance of the plant was also presented as factors influencing water management. Critical stages of water requirement for various crops are discussed in detail. The importance of lining of channels for reducing the seepage loss and evaporation loss was also discussed. Water harvesting and conservation are also highlighted. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with the next chapter.